we'll put the recording on that private site in case you guys or somebody else who had wanted to see it or missed it or hadn't dropped early is able to get in there and look at the recording. So I know we got some new folks, so we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Ed Cook, and I'll be one of the facilitators for this. And with me is
Roxanne Brown, co-facilitator.
So,
We're partners at the Change Decision.
So we're going to go ahead and flip over to our PowerPoint. Oh, we got some more people coming in, so I'll let them in. And let me share my screen and we'll get going with the presentation. All right, so today we'll be talking about influencers and understanding them in the workplace. And so as we get going here, I want to just do a little reminder about Zoom. So just kind of go through some of the basics and make sure everybody's cool with all of that. So we've brought you in, we'll try to keep folks on mute. And so if you want to come off mute, that's great. Go ahead and ask a question.
Ed, we can't hear you.
Yeah, Ed, you're on mute now.
You went on mute.
Yeah, Ed.
So when it says mute all, they mean all. So just so you know, it is actually everyone. Thank you guys for saying something.
That's hilarious.
All right, so don't do that. That was a mistake. All right, so thanks. So anyway, just like you did, if anything really dumb comes up, like I mute myself, please come off of mute and let me know. We got the chat up, so we'll be monitoring the chat as we go through. So if you guys got something that you want to say and prefer to do it via chat, that's great. And we'll monitor the chat window as well. Please use that, and we'll actually use the chat to do some interaction back and forth with folks. If you want, we can, on the participant one, as you see that where that brown arrow is, there are a whole series of emoticons that you can use as well. So if you'd like to use that to send us some information, that'll show up in the chat window, so we can give that a try. And you can also use the reaction section. It's got a hand clapping and a thumbs up. So if it's easier for you to interact that way or answer questions that way, that's great. So just go ahead and use all the functionality. You can change around your screen view. So we'll be showing PowerPoint for most of this, but we'll take it off and be on video for a few components back and forth. And so you can choose which of those that you want to use. And then lastly, it would be great if you guys could put yourself on video. I know not everybody is going to be camera ready. Roxanne and I went through 2 or 3 hours of hair and makeup before we came on. So we know not everyone, is going to be ready to broadcast their image. But if you could, that'd be great, because we would love to be able to see all you guys. All right, so what we'd like to do is just start similar to how we did last time, and ask you guys in the chat window if you can just give us a sentence or two on what you hope you will be able to get out of this session about knowing your influencers. And we'll take a look at what folks come up with for that. So please go ahead and let us know what you're thinking.
Influencing my influencers. Yes. Perfect. Oh, good. Already helpful, making more thoughtful about people around me. That's awesome. Identifying influencers. Yeah, positive or negative. We'll definitely be talking about that. Influencing executives. Yeah, hard to access. Different strategies. Yep, motivation for influencers. More effective. Tools to recognize influencers, getting everybody involved. Messages resonate with executives versus peers. Difficult influencers. Yeah, easy wins versus the harder to convince. Oh, enhance your own role as an influencer. That's cool. Yeah, certain traits inherent in influencers. How to phase, stagger rollout, phase or stagger rollout when there are multiple innovations going on to avoid change overload. Oh yeah.
Amber says +1. All right, good.
+1. Awesome.
All right, so we're going to touch on many of those. Some of the items that you have in there are probably they are a bit more advanced than what we're going to be able to do in the next 90 minutes. But definitely, like what motivates folks, things to think about around influencers and how to influence the influencers. We're definitely going to be talking about that. How to even get to those influencers and know who they are, so that we're able to take them on and think about how we're going to do this. So one of the things that would be good, I'm guessing that many of you have this already because of the questions you're asking, but if you can think about a change that you have or that you have coming up, that would be useful, because as we're going through this, if you are kind of able to bring that to mind, that's going to be valuable for you guys as we're working through some of what we're putting together today. So that's awesome. All right, so where we are, we did the change story last week, and now influencers this week. So we'll be talking about a lot, and the last week was why, and the kind of story around what's going on with the change. Today we're diving into the people that'll have the bigger impact on the change, and that sets us up for the metrics, which we'll be getting into next week. So that's kind of where we are in the series of 5 that we're doing. And so let's go ahead and get into some of the stuff. So I'll turn it over to Roxanne.
Thank you. So you'll remember last time we talked about 2 big ideas. One is change management is simply an act of respect. And the next one is in order for a change to happen, the leader must change first. Those are some basic ideas that we will refer to constantly in everything that we share. So we just wanted to revisit that. We also wanted to talk a little bit about change and joy. The 2 concepts about change being an act of respect and the leader must change first, those are really directed at those who would lead change, so like you all. And this is about inviting people to contribute joy at work. So the leader's job, and in terms of creating a joyful workplace, is to create the environment and then give the invitation to employees to contribute. And then it's the employee's job to take that offer and contribute joy. So that's how for us, those things go together. It's not just about the leader creating the environment, it's also about what the employees do to contribute ultimately to a joyful workplace. So that to us is bringing the leader and the employee together. If you go to the next slide, one of the reasons why we talk about joy is because this probably won't be a surprise to you guys, that emotional connection is really something that we're finding matters to people with work. Not a surprise at all to us, because we know that you spend most of your life working. That's pretty much the reason why I chose to go into the work of change, because change is hard typically for people. And once you realize that there's a way to do it that's actually beneficial for the organization as well as the employee, it makes a lot of sense to try and do that. At least it does to me, especially when you spend most of your time working. Why not create a place that's enjoyable? It has a tremendous ripple effect. And there's some data you can see here, the data points that we've chosen to share that connect to these ideas. So this is kind of goes to the case for why choose joy. So when we go to the next slide?
Yeah. So I want to step into thinking a little bit about the cultural aspects of this. And so what we have are a series of pairs of descriptions for the culture. And we'd like you guys to think about the culture at the companies that you work for. And what we're going to do is go through a process that we think is useful for kind of getting you to think about, well, what is actually the culture here and how do I do it? And so we're going to go through a series of these things, and we call these culture coins. Typically, the way that we would do this is we would be in person, and we literally have little cardboard coins that we put together, but that's not so easy right now. So we're going to go and try and do an electronic version of that, and we're going to use part of the whiteboard functionality on Zoom in order to go do that. So let me see if I can direct you on how to get to these things. So what we're going to do is we're going to have you guys be able to create stamps that we're actually going to do on the whiteboard. And the way to get to those is you want to get, it's probably at the top of your screen for most of you. If you bring your cursor up, unfortunately I can't show you this because it doesn't project on Zoom. There's a little pen tool and it says annotate on the pen tool.
It's under view options.
So yeah, you may get it, I know on the Mac it's showing up as a view option. On the PC, it seems to just float in.
Oh, okay.
So once you get there, you go down to where it says annotate. And then there's a one kind of in the middle that says stamp. And if you hover over that, you'll see that there are 6 different icons you could use. People are finding them already. As soon as you click on the icon and then click on the screen, it'll put the item on there. So go ahead and try it. Just go and see if you can put yours out there. So make sure we're good. I love the people that, it's interesting I wish we could know who chooses stars and who chooses hearts and why other things are not chosen. So interesting. All right. So if I ask you to stop doing that and quit trying to make smiley faces with stamps, we're going to go through and see if we can actually try and do this. So I'm going to clear off all the drawings. And I'm going to bring up the first culture coin. All right. So if you see your company more as being first, then put your stamp above the circle. And if you see your company more as being the best, put it below. And you only get to choose one.
Oh, look at that. Huh. Being the best. Wow. And I think we have a squiggle at the top.
Oh, so some people have figured out how to draw. Nice. All right.
That's awesome.
All right, cool. Let's do the next one. Do you see your company as more flexible, or is it more about defined action? It's a little bit more evenly spaced. It's also interesting to see how good people are with their cursors. Like, can they actually hit the circle or not? All right, good. Let's do one more. Are you mostly about fun, or are you mostly about thinking?
Ooh, nice arrow. Huh. It's a lot like the previous one.
Yeah. All right, so one more. Solving problems or defining possibilities?
Wow.
Wow.
Interesting.
All right, so this one's, I think it's kind of a cool one. So maybe we could, if you guys could give us in the chat window a sentence, maybe two if you need to, on it's an example of how your company culture does one or the other, either is problem solving or defining opportunity or defining possibilities. We did have one chat about, hey, I'm not sure I don't have a company right now. What should I choose? I think if you want to just think about a group that you've worked with before, and if you're lucky enough to never ever have had to work, then you can just take it on as what do I wish it was? Monthly leadership forum. Yep. Innovative curriculum. Emerging client changes. That's a good one. Dana has, one of our core values is creativity with the behavior to explore and experiment. #Luckstone. So Dana, can I put you on the spot and ask you, can you tell us more about that? Because that's pretty cool, actually. I don't hear a lot of companies that say we have creativity as one of our cores unless they're in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, or like tech.
Yeah, would you mind telling us a little bit about that? How that shows up in your culture?
Sure. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So I think for us, we're very customer centric. And so for us, we're always trying to be curious and open to change, and trying to figure out how we can be first movers in our area. So we distribute a commoditized product in crushed stone. So really our differentiating factor is our service and how we form relationships. And so one of our core values being creativity helps us look at kind of the defining possibilities side of that coin, I would say, more often than solving problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And since it pops to mind for you, clearly something that is in the culture and people think about. That's great. All right, let's try a few more. What about security versus adventure?
I think you got one right on the line.
It's always somebody that says, no, I will,
Right in the
I will
middle.
not choose.
Oh, look at those arrows.
That's great. All right. How about innovation versus improvement? Oh, interesting. A lot of innovators.
Right.
All right. Relationships and metrics. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push forward on these and I'll put the rest of them up so you can see them. So I want to make sure you keep moving.
Ideas.
And I'll let you guys answer the rest of those. So the point of this is to get you to think about, what does this tell you about your organization's culture? And, we picked these because they aren't easy to go one way or another. Some are for some folks, but a lot of people will struggle with them and go, well, we're a little bit of both and it depends on the situation. And so, this is a little contrived and we're making you pick one or the other, but it's interesting because it kind of forces you to have to go one way or another and really pushing you to think about, well, what is it that's core to our culture and how do we think about that? All right.
Look at that. I love this. It looks gorgeous.
I know, we should just leave it up the whole time. No, let's not do that. All right, I'm going to clear out all our drawings. We wanted to tell you a little bit about us because we didn't get a chance to do that yesterday. And when we start to talk about influencers, that's actually pretty germane to the story, really, that is the start for Roxanne and I. So the whole idea of the change decision came years ago when Roxanne and I were working for Capital One, and we were working on a large programmatic effort that I was the program manager for, and Roxanne was the change lead for. And the program was going badly. I mean, really, really badly. So we had had to readjust the budget from a $36 million budget to a $72 million budget. And so those of you that aren't wrapping your brain around those numbers, having to go in and tell your boss that you're gonna have to spend over $35 million more to complete a project is not a positive career move. So I had to go do that. And then at its lowest point, the CEO of the company had actually called out the project as a disappointment. And literally within that week, I'd started working on my resume, starting to think about what my next move was going to be, because clearly it wasn't going to be staying at Capital One anymore, because the CEO was actually pointing to the thing that I was working on and calling it bad. Fortunately for me, Roxanne convinced me to try and do something else and actually try and start with leading the organization, this group. And we had a lot of people, it's about 250 people working on this program. And lead it in a different way and actually drive a different outcome. And she worked with me and worked with my leadership team in order to be able to set a completely different tone and change the interactions for how we were conducting even the basic weekly meeting to much larger group meetings. And it centered a lot around not only where we really wanted to go, where I wanted to go with all of this, but who were the people that were the big influencers within the group that we had, as well as the senior executives who are the stakeholders that were paying the bills and really own this thing. And within the next year or so, because it's a very long project, we turned this thing around from something that was incredibly disappointing to the CEO to something that became this beacon within the company as to how to actually execute on these projects. And you're seeing photos of some of the people that we worked with during that project, and also people that we've been able to work with since, kind of applying these same ideas. And it really is the origin of the name of the company, the change decision. So can you make a decision to change and actually be a different kind of leader, and as a result of that, a different kind of company? And so all this that we've talked about last week, what we'll talk about today, and how as we go through the rest of the series, kind of comes out of that experience. And we were able to repeat it 2 more times in 2 very large programs, back to back at Capital One, and then eventually coming out and starting the change decision and doing this as a consultancy. So that's our background, and where we really came from. Sort of exciting that we now get to be out in the world and doing this. And we kind of marvel occasionally that we get to log into this Zoom meeting and talk to all of you about this thing that we really have a lot of passion and interest about. So we're very glad that you're here and glad that we get a chance to connect with all of you guys. So that's a little bit about who we are and where we've come from. Our big lesson, and you've seen it before, is that before a change can happen, the leader must change first. So we were going nowhere with the way that I was leading that program. And we didn't turn that around until I started to change as the leader. And I was fortunate that Roxanne was there to coach me and in terms of how to do it. But I had to first want to do it and recognize that we weren't going to get to the place we wanted to be unless I actually acted differently. So we'd love to talk to you guys more about that. But we're going to keep moving, and I'll let Roxanne start to talk about the meat of what we want to talk about today.
So, okay, that's great. Just tying back to what we did earlier with the culture coins, one of the things that that might bring up for you is this idea of what your culture values. What you're doing by choosing is basically saying, or considering, okay, what is my culture value, and then how does that show up in how, how my workplace operates, and, the practices that we have at work, that the practices that we value. So when you think about change, you think about it in that context, right? So whatever the change is, how different is it from the thing that your culture values? That definitely matters in terms of how well it will be immediately received by the people who work there. So if you go to the next slide, one of the things we talked about last time is this notion of doing an impact assessment. We usually start with these 4 questions. Of course, you can go into much more depth than this, but asking these 4 questions when you think about who might be going through a change helps you get a sense of how big a deal this is. So, oh look, there's a heart. You can see it. So the idea is, what will people need to do differently, right? So you ask yourself that. And then what is the expected reaction, and why do you think that is? And then what does successful implementation look like from their point of view? Like, how will you know they've succeeded in fully adopting to this new state? And then, are there any pressing needs today? That usually is about, do they need certain information? Does someone need to go have a conversation with them, make sure they're good? Is there some sort of barrier in the way? Perhaps they're that person or the group of people is working on a project that is going to be no longer relevant when you're introducing this change. So that could be in that category of a pressing need to consider when you are thinking about analyzing impact. So I wanted to bring this back the second time, because this is always how we're thinking about change is, okay, what does it mean to people? Meaning, how big a deal is it for them versus what they would normally expect to be happening? And that's certainly connected to culture, among other things. So if you go to the next slide. So we wanted to talk to you about the influencer exercise that, if you saw the video that we sent in advance, we talked a little bit about. And if you got on the private page, the exercise is on the page as well. And again, just to be clear, there was no need, there's no pre-work that you had to do this at all. We just wanted to introduce it to you in advance in case you wanted to take a look and you happen to have time to do that. So the point of it is for you to help see who are the influencers in your organization and why that is. So that's what the exercise is meant to do. Give you some specific language and definition. Things that you probably already know implicitly, but this brings it out more explicitly, and you can start to see, oh, this is why they're so influential. You may have noticed, if you looked at it, that it has nothing to do with positive or negative influence when you're doing the analysis. The answers to those questions, you may conclude, oh, wow, this is kind of a negative influence, or you may conclude that this is a positive influence. They still could be quite a bit of influence, right? But so it tries to stay away from that judgment call. It allows you to make the ultimate call about how positive or negative it is affecting the culture and the team. So that's the influencer exercise, and we'll run through this quickly so that you have a sense of what it does, and see if you want to use it in the future. And so if you go to the next slide, the reason why we want to understand the impact of influencers is because we want to understand what kind of impact they have on things like this, like the employee experience, or the company's stability and growth, or adaptability and to the marketplace, decision-making, things like that. I mean, you can imagine, if you think about someone who's influential on your team, that they are having a pretty significant impact on a team member's employee experience, the experience at work. Maybe that's uneven. In other words, for some, that particular influence has a lot of impact on their experience, and for others, not so much. But it gives you, by looking at these influencers closely, you can kind of get a sense of, oh, okay, this is how they have an impact on decision making and these other aspects, the team overall. So if you go through the exercise, this is a visual of all the dimensions, and we see there being 11 of them. that are sources of influence. And if you go through the exercise itself, you will find that those are the 11 questions that we ask you to answer. And the other thing that's really fascinating about this is there's a combination here. So it might be personality is really strong, authority is really strong, but the dependency is really low. So again, it gives you some specific language and gives you, it makes you hone in on why they're so influential given all of these sources. So let's quickly run through the questions. So the first thing that we ask you to do is think about the authority that the person has. So and these, by the way, are questions written as if you are asking questions about the influencer as it relates to you, so just to give you that context. So when you think about somebody's authority, where do they sit in the org chart? And, you know, are they a peer? Are they a leader? You know, that is a kind of one dimension. So what is their authority level? And then what kind of implicit role do they play? What kind of authority do they have associated with their role? You go to the next slide, proximity. So this is where a person sits in terms of as it relates to you. Now the thing about that is we're in a virtual space right now. So it's not just about physical distance. It's also about, are they in meetings with you? So, and that was true before all of this was happening. So part of the questions ask you, how often are you in meetings together? So proximity relates to that as well. Personality, how strong is the person's presence felt by you? So this is a really great one. If you can probably imagine a time when you were in a room with a group of people and then someone entered and then all the air got sucked out of the room, everybody got quiet. Or you can imagine another time when you were in a room with a group of people and somebody walked in and everyone lit up and really, you know, got much more animated. So that's two examples of strong presence. Then there's interaction. So how frequently do you interact with them? One of the things that we love, I don't know if you guys know Susan Scott, she wrote Fierce Conversations. And one of the things she says is the conversation is the relationship. So if you think about that, that has to do with the quality of the conversation that you have with that person and how often you have those conversations. So, you know, how frequently do you have an interaction with this person? So that's definitely an aspect of influence. Next is dependency. So how dependent are you on another person to be successful in your role? And then if you go to the next one, how dependent is that person on you to be successful in their role? So the higher the dependency, the more influence there is. And then reaction. How often do you wait and see how this person reacts before you express your opinion? So that's a dimension. Adjustment. How often do you adjust your thinking based on that person's point of view? Respect. How much respect do you have for that person's work, for their experience or their role, expertise? Anticipation. How much time do you spend preparing to communicate with this person? And then disagreement. How difficult would it be? How would your job be if you disagreed with this person? And that's all 11 of the dimensions. So if you go through the exercise, you'll notice that you know, it'll vary quite a bit amongst these different dimensions, and ultimately you'll decide in the next part. Do we go to scoring next? I think we go to scoring.
You can zoom in. No.
Yeah. So if you zoom in on your influencers, great. Okay. So what we do in a stakeholder analysis is we zoom in on the influencers in particular. So those folks who are in that org chart that you consider, oh, these are the folks that are most influential. It's really useful to do what we call a stakeholder analysis to really figure out what's important to them, especially as it relates to this change. So we do this, we use these 4 steps. We decide first on what stakeholders what influencers do you want to focus on? And then you next have a stakeholder analysis conversation. So going back to the exercise, there's a scoring sheet where you take all of the answers and you place them here for each person. And the higher the number, the more influence they have, is basically the bottom line. And I think that's the next slide. Yep. And then the questions after that are really for you to think about how big an impact are they having on the culture. So again, going through this exercise, you'll be able to not only see what dimensions they really score high for them, you'll be able to start to think, okay, well, how good or bad is this for this culture that for our team? So that's the exercise itself. And like I said, not required to go through it, but it really can be very enlightening. So if we go to the stakeholder analysis questions, these are the questions that we ask in that conversation. So we ask the question, what is the stakeholder's name? What is their role? But then we start asking more interesting questions, like what is unique about their role? And then what is their interest in the change? What would they say about it today? What would they say about it ideally? What would they do ideally to support the change? And what would most help them to support the change? And as you progress in answering these questions, it's amazing what will come to light. That first question about what's unique about their role, starting just right there, may be a question that you've never asked before, but even answering that can bring to light, oh, this is what's unique about their role, and therefore what their interest might be in this change, or what their aversion might be toward the change. So those are the questions that we typically ask.
And we're going to ask them today.
And we are going to ask them today, yes.
All right, so we're back to Leadership Skyward. And one of the first things that we need to do is we need to get our leadership team together. So I didn't mention this at the beginning of the session, so I'll say it now. We have so many people on that we're not going to be able to include everybody into the conversation. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask 5 people to play the role of the 5 executives for Leadership Skyward, which is our case company that we've got here. So I want to go through and pick those people out first. You don't have to do it, but we would love for you to be brave and do it. And we're keeping track of who we're picking, and so we're hoping to be able to keep spreading it around as we go further and further into the session. So the 5 folks that were with us before, I won't put you on the spot again, but we're going to get 5 new people now. And the roles that we need are a chief pilot, a VP of maintenance, a VP of flight operations, a VP of logistics, and a VP of sales and marketing. So I'm just going to call people out and ask your indulgence to jump in and play with us. And so what I'd love for you to do is come off of mute, and you can let me know that you're interested in playing by using an aviation term, which is Wilco. And we'll get to what Wilco means later, but you can just say it for now. So first we need a chief pilot. Nate, are you up for being our chief pilot? Oh no, I lost him.
Oh no, maybe not.
Oh no. All right, well, we'll have to pick a new chief pilot then. Let's see, Megan Howell, you want to be our chief pilot?
Wilco.
Oh, good. Awesome.
I can beat something as well. I was muted. And
Oh, all right.
No,
Well,
Nate.
Nate, you're
and the
now VP
bar
of
was
maintenance.
not working.
How about VP of maintenance? You're in.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Okay.
Glenn Sink, how about VP of flight operations? Now, I'm surprising people now. I'm on the random if you happen to be on All right. If you're on video and I can see you, then, I'm picking you. So Glenn's
Operations.
going to be our VP of operations.
Awesome.
So thank you for that. All right, let me find some more people and see if we can bring them in. Julie, how would you like to be a VP of logistics?
Silence.
I know you're out there, Julie. All right, we'll let Julie find how to unmute. Caroline, can I get you to be VP of Sales and Marketing?
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So Julie, are you with us? Yep, there she is. Okay. So we got Julie. She's going to be VP of Logistics. All right. So we got our team. We're ready. We're ready for action on that. Thanks everyone for agreeing to play with us. So I'm going to get the rest of the stuff set up. And while I do that, Roxanne is going to just give you a reminder about Leadership Skyward and kind of where we are in the process right now.
Okay, cool. So just a reminder, the Leadership Skyward is a leadership experience company. And what the company does is hold 2 to 3 day leadership workshops. And what they do is share leadership best practices and also combine that with a flight experience. So it's a workshop. It's a few days, it's highly intense, that kind of thing. So the change that we're experiencing, or Leadership Skyward is going through, is that Ed, the CEO, is stepping down. Now, he is not stepping away from the company entirely. He is going to still do the flights, the instruction, that sort of thing, but he's not going to be running the organization day to day. So that's a big shift for everyone. And when we talked the last time, we did the change story. And so some of the things that came to light in that discussion with the leadership team is that Ed's not going to leave right away. He's going to really wait to find somebody who is good for the company. So he's not in a big rush. So that's good. This is not a growth move. It's more of a strategic move so that Ed can step away from running the company. Let's see, some of the other things that the leadership team was going to talk about, what characteristics that they want in a CEO and before the process is started. And they need to talk about, okay, what's the communication plan for sharing this with people? What's the communication plan for sharing with clients? Things like that. So that's kind of what the change story was all about 2 weeks ago. And so now we have done the stakeholder analysis and realized that we have 3 influencers, and that they are Frida, Hector, and Cassandra. And so let me tell you a little bit about them. So Frida is the pilot, like Ed, and Hector is the airfield manager. He's not with Leadership Skyward, and Cassandra is the head mechanic. So Frida has been with Leadership Skyward since the beginning, and she has a ton of flight experience. Ed and Frida work closely together. She has said that she's staying because of Ed. As long as Ed is here, I'm staying. She's very proud of her work. She loves flying, and Ed repeatedly turns to her for her experience and expertise whenever developing or delivering workshops. So she is very highly valued and very influential to the organization. Hector is the airfield manager, like I mentioned, and he's not with Leadership Skyward, and he's a little bit cranky with Leadership Skyward. It's not that he doesn't like Leadership Skyward. It's not really that, but he sees Leadership Skyward as pretty demanding because the company really wants concierge services, and Hector, may or may not feel like he has time for that. And he's not exactly what you would call a warm personality anyway, so he's not really finding the value in all of that. He has a team of 18 people that work for him at the airfield. Cassandra is the chief mechanic, and she's relatively new at Leadership Skyward, been there a couple of years, and she, in her short time, has improved maintenance quite a bit. And there have been no cancellations and very few delays since she started. She's, she is with it, proactive there, practically on the airfield all the time. And one of the things that is unique about Cassandra's experience is that she always goes up with Ed and the chief pilot and Frida whenever they do a post-maintenance check flight. And that's very rare in aviation, apparently. She really appreciates how she's being treated at the company. So that's Cassandra. So those are the 3 influencers that have been identified by going through the stakeholder analysis. So I'll bring Ed back in.
All right, team. We got to get together and figure out how we're going to handle what's going on with our major influencers here. So Roxanne, who's our change consultant, is going to be working with us to map all of this out for each of the 3 of them. So Roxanne's putting up her screen right now. And so as we go through these questions, she's going to kind of be helping us out. And I think we'll start with Frida.
Yeah. So Frida, we know what her name is, and her role is pilot. And what would you say is unique about Frida's role?
Well, there's only 3 of us, right? So there's, me and Megan as our chief pilot, and Frida is one of the others, and that's it, right? So in the 30 or so folks that we've got, we only have 3 pilots in the organization, and she probably has, closer connection to me personally, just because we're in the cockpit a lot, so we just hang out together for more than I do with anybody else, except for maybe Megan when we're flying as well.
Okay, excellent. So how about Frida's interest in the change? Sounds like, given your relationship, she's probably not gonna like it.
Well, I guess I worry about that, a little bit, just because of the, the changeover that might be there. I don't know, Megan, if you got any thoughts on, when you think about someone like Frida and her background and just like how much she loves flying, is this a change she's going to care about if she gets to keep flying and that's really what's most important? Or is this it's not really a big deal for her because she gets to do the thing she wants? I'm not really sure which way it will go. What do you think?
No, I think that Frida's probably not only closest to you, but closest to the employees, because she's sort of got her hands in there as the pilot and not necessarily the chief pilot or the CEO. And so she's going to want to make sure she can maintain that relationship. But you're probably a big sponsor of that relationship. And so somebody else comes in and has a different protocol, I think she might be a little bit concerned and hesitant because that might be compromised.
Yeah, okay. So just, she's been there, well, since the beginning. And so we've been doing it the way we've been doing it. And she's driven a lot of that. So somebody else comes in and says, no, we're doing it this other way. That might be tough for her.
Right. And she's come to understand that you have a lot of stock in her. And so somebody new naturally would not yet have that much trust.
So you think she would she just be worried, or would you think she would come out and go, I'm not happy about this change right now?
She may be calculated in her acceptance of it.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
Very good. It's like a SAT phrase examination there. Very nice. Okay. We start thinking about where we want to go with her. Where do we need to get her? What do we need her to be able to say about the change? Is she going to be so influential that we got to make a change? We got to get her on the positive side, or what do you think?
I definitely think that she needs to be influenced first on the change. Maybe bring her to your understanding of the positive side of it, since she has so much trust in you.
Yep. So that means having conversation with you then, right?
Yeah, it sounds like I need to talk to her. Okay. So that'll be one of the actions that we want to take in order to lay this out and be able to make sure that we're helping her to understand where the change is going to land, how it's going to impact her, hopefully get her on the positive side for all of this.
What do you think she would say about it today? Maybe you said that already.
Yeah, I think Megan was kind of thinking that she's going to be a bit reserved about it. I can't remember your phrase now, Megan. What'd you say? She's going to be
Calculated about her acceptance of it.
Thank you. Calculated about her acceptance. Megan she's particularly brainy for a pilot. We don't typically have people that are that clever.
Awesome. Okay. And so what would we want her to say? We want her to say that she's on board, or she's excited. What would we want her to say ideally?
Well, I think she's influential, right? So she's going to be somebody that's going to be in front of the clients all the time.
Yep.
And interacts with really everybody, right? Because just the nature of it. So from operations to sales to, whatever's going on with maintenance. So I think we need to be her on the good side. Otherwise, we're probably in trouble. She needs to be a fan.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask a little bit more detailed question. So what would make her, if other employees in the company were looking at her, what would give them, hearing this from Frida would make them feel comfortable? What would that be?
I think they want, we want her to be talking about what are the benefits of my stepping out.
Okay.
So that might be, something that.
It's pilot related, right?
Yeah, but I think also I just think about so Glenn, as flight operations, you have responsibility for when do the planes go, when are they flying, where are they going to be, all that kind of stuff. And I know that, that hasn't really been the thing I focused on all that much in the past. So do you think if we've got that nailed better, that would be something that Frida would be excited about, or do you think she doesn't really care? I mean, how would you see that going?
I would think as a pilot, she would care about that. She has a voice that touches not only operations, but a lot of other elements. So having an understanding and caring about where you're at is important to her.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's I think in bringing in a new CEO, that's one of the things going to want the new CEO to work on, right? So, we can make improvements operationally, improve our efficiency for sure. We're experiencing all the things that small companies experience, right? We've done things the way that we've done them since our inception, and I've spent some time on that, and probably not the amount of time that it would be great to have if we had a CEO that was paying attention to that more than I have. So my intention is we're bringing in somebody that's going to make us better, not just somebody that's going to be a caretaker.
Okay, so she would be saying some good things about how flight operations could be improved or might be improved by this.
Yeah.
And then ideally, is there anything she would do? I mean, would she ideally share this with people proactively, or what would be a great pilot thing?
Well, I think it's probably more of a reinforcement, right? So nobody else within the company reports to her. So she doesn't have any, that kind of manager responsibility. But she's going to be, the rumor mill is going to fly around, and she is going to interact with most of the people in the company, just the nature of her job. So having her as a positive force, so she's saying something positive about the change, is going to be important. Because the opposite would be devastating. Like she was starting to talk about this being bad for leadership skyward. That is going to go rapidly through the whole company because of all the people that she talks to.
So as an example, if on the negative side, if she stopped doing her normal things like being on time, the things that she's known for.
Yeah, even like being around and being
Being
more
around,
engaged and all,
present.
people will notice.
Right.
So if she starts retracting, then folks are going to notice the difference.
Okay, so we want her to maintain her presence and her normal work behaviors or work practices.
Right. Right. Because even that's even impactful for the clients, right? So, Caroline, I know that you have had success with Frida being able to talk to the clients. Clients like being able to talk to a pilot when you're trying to land a corporate deal, having her get on the phone and talk to them about what the experience is going to be like, seems to be something that's been valuable. So does that make sense to you that you would want her to be, she has to be more on the positive, good side and can't
Sure.
be neutral or negative?
Definitely makes sense with the operations side.
Yeah. And Caroline, then for
Mhm.
sales, are you thinking the same thing, that you'd want her, or does
She's
it
a
not
great
really matter?
she's a great spokeswoman for our company.
Okay. So yeah, given her position, I think, that's where we're going to have to get her.
Okay, great. Sales ability. Okay.
As an influencer, she needs to be recognized as engaged in the outside world as your sales
Yeah.
staff, and as a result, it's important to get to the pilots early in the change process.
Yeah. No, that makes sense for sure. So, Nate, Julie, you guys got anything else that you want to throw in there? Maybe we're good with those.
I think
Yeah,
that's
so-
good points. I don't have a lot to add at the moment.
Okay, cool.
So what we can do is move on to Hector if you want.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so I'm gonna make another, since we filled that one up. All right, let's talk about Hector. So he is, we call him the hangar manager.
Yeah, Hector's the
Airfield
airfield
manager.
manager. So his job is taking care of all the other facilities. So what's going on with everything around the airfield, from gas to getting electric power set up. He's responsible for all the hangars. He more or less owns all the tenant relationships that are there. So every other company that's on the airfield all is dealing with Hector. For us, the big impacts are going to be around maintenance and logistics in particular, because Hector is the one that's going to assign the spots for the aircraft, and is also going to be the one to provide any of the other like higher level maintenance services that we need.
Okay.
But he's grouchy, right? Nate, you deal with him more than anybody else. I mean, you've been talking about how Hector's always mad about our requests for more stuff, and we want it faster. And I'm pushing on him because we've got these high-end clients, and I want to make sure that we're getting as good an experience as we possibly can for them. So how do you feel about where Hector is going to be with all of this, and is there anything else, anything that comes to mind for you about where you think he is on the change itself? What he would say right now?
Well, I think we've got a pretty good relationship with Hector, but as it's been noted, Hector is concerned about the quick turn demands on time that we represent. So we tend to take up a lot of prime spots, and we tend to want to do it at the drop of a hat so that we can provide this premium concierge service. and we're operating out of this little airfield.
Yeah.
So his biggest concern is going to be, are we going to get a better relationship with him, and are we going to perform differently and give him more headaches, or are we going to find ways to make that relationship better?
Yeah.
It almost doesn't have anything to do with the CEO, unless the CEO is the one that's driving that relationship. But the CEO is going to set the tone for how that relationship goes forward.
Yeah.
With the new CEO.
Yeah. Well, it's a good point. I haven't really thought about it, right? Because when we were little, and new, it was me, right? So the tone of our relationship really got started with, what I was doing, and probably the headbutting that I've had with Hector over the years set that tone. So I hadn't really thought about, bringing in a new CEO as a chance for us to reset that relationship, because now it doesn't have to deal with me at all. The new CEO can make sure that all that's delegated really to you guys, so that the new CEO is not necessarily in there, and that could be like a whole different thing.
Yep. So that's interesting. Kind of makes me want to go to Saul, but I'm going to hold off on that. Well, so what do you think he would say about the change today? Nate,
Well,
are you saying?
I think that he's going to want to know who's coming into that role, who's going to be his main point of contact. Assuming it was the CEO before,
Right.
Who's going to be his new main point of contact, and are they going to understand the constraints that he's under? So what I would say is that it's going to be really important, especially if it's an outside person, for him to be introduced to that person, for them to spend some time together, for him to be equipped with good questions to ask so that that person feels heard. Don't just put him in there and assume that he's going to ask the right questions. Give him the right questions to ask, and kind of role play that a little bit with him based on what you know about him.
Yeah.
And, really consciously build the foundations of that relationship. And if it's an internal person, then they're stepping up into a new role, and they need to understand the things that are able to be impacted, the things that he has control over, and the things that he doesn't have control over, and that he's not comfortable bending for us.
Yeah. Yeah, so potentially we could use this entire thing as a way to reset our relationship with him. So if we start to think about where could we get Hector ideally we could get Hector to, this is awesome, I'm glad we got the new CEO in, a previous headache is now removed, and I get to have a better relationship with Leadership Skyward than I've had in the past, because it just hasn't worked out with Ed. So that seems like potentially we could set this up as a win and get him ideally into the really positive and saying positive things about a new CEO coming in.
Okay. That's great. Cool. So then if you can imagine him saying something ideally, Hector, about this change, what would he say? Like, if you can imagine he's happy.
I think he would say, this is the best move for Leadership Skyward. Get a professional manager in, not some knucklehead pilot running the organization, and it would be better off as a result of that. I'd probably actually say it really similarly to what I just said.
Get a professional in. Okay. Awesome. So what would they do ideally to support the change?
Well, I think a lot of stuff that Nate was talking about might be where we want it to go, right? So if we proactively reach out, that ideally he would accept, right? And the new CEO comes in, and Nate would probably have a deeper relationship with them. Glenn is going to need to have a deeper relationship with them with flight operations. So if he's more willing to engage with them because I'm out of the picture, at least he perceives that I'm out of the picture, then that would be a significant improvement for us.
Okay. That's cool. All right. Anything else?
No, I think it's good.
All right, cool. That's great. How about Cassandra, Chief Mechanic?
Yeah, so, I mean, Cassandra's got a pretty, there's definitely some important things that are unique about her role that aren't necessarily wrapped around job title. I think with all that she has been able to do to improve maintenance, just her skills in being able to keep the aircraft up has been a pretty big, lift to what we're doing at Leadership Skyward. But she's new, doesn't have the history. It's always worry about, a leadership change as a result of that. Like, is that going to make a big difference to her or to anybody else really in maintenance as a result of that?
All right.
The other thing is, this comes in with a lot of the work we do because we're moving the planes to where the people are, and we take the maintenance folks with us. So, she's been good about doing that, and that was not really in her, I wouldn't say that's in a typical job description, right? The maintenance person hangs out at the airfield where they work. They're not typically on the road. And we've been, asking her to go do that. And I know, Julie, as our head of logistics, that's been useful for you because you've got people right at the place where we're interacting with customers, clients. And as a result of that, when we have a problem, we fix it right away, which is not what we were doing before. So I don't know if you have, Julie, if you have any other concerns about her or about what you think what's different about her role that we need to worry about in terms of keeping her happy.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay, sorry. It's a different setup than I'm used to.
That's all right. We'll get maintenance
So-
and fix it for you.
That's right. I can call somebody in. So I'm operating on a little bit of limited context here, but I would think, given what you've said, that she would probably be, if she likes the change that's been going on and doing those different things, then she would be worried that she might be relegated back to just the way
Yeah.
things used to be, or what someone perceives the mechanic's role to be, or it could be the opposite, that this is an opportunity to really sell her skills to be something more, or create a new opportunity for the organization that she could pursue with someone new.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point because it's probably, initially a change like that is probably a downside for her, right? So she's been really, or can perceive it that way. She's been getting to do what she wants to do and is doing that really well, and it's going great the way things are now. Throwing in a new leader, new CEO potentially puts that, to some level in jeopardy because she won't really know. And what does that mean for her? Does her role end up changing as a result of that?
Mhm. Yeah. So just to make sure I understand, what is unique about Cassandra's role? Is it,
I think it's more that it's her. There are other maintainers, right? There are
There
other
okay.
maintenance people. She's just the chief maintenance person. What's unique is that she travels, and that is
Okay.
unusual for anyone in the any mechanic in the aviation industry. That's just not what they do. They work out of the field that they work out of, and that wasn't even something that we talked about when she took the role. She stepped into it, and that's made a big difference for us.
and does she have people who report to her?
Yeah, so all the rest of the maintenance people report to her as the chief mechanic. So she's responsible for their work, the quality of their work, and ultimately the quality of the aircraft.
Okay, so how she reacts to this is going to matter to them for sure.
Yeah, and that's the biggest group within the company, right?
Yeah.
The majority of the people are in the maintenance shop.
Okay.
Ed, I think there's a lot of similarity between Cassandra and Frida as far as like their role is unique
Mm.
because of the closeness or I guess the sponsorship that they've gotten in order to be a little bit flexible in what their traditional roles would be. And the difference with Cassandra seems to be that she is in a management position,
Mhm.
whereas Frida has like casual communication, but Cassandra can directly affect like the people that directly report to her.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's going to be kind of similar in the approach that you might want to take with Cassandra.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's really good.
So we need to think about those unique aspects in the roles.
Yeah, especially when so many of the a large percentage of the employee population reports to her,
Right.
and she's new.
Right.
Do you have any sense of how well they're working together? It sounds like they must be working well together.
Yeah, great. So they're, they are on the road, and the interaction goes well. And so, yeah, I would say they have a strong working relationship.
Okay. How about, what would she say about it?
Well, I think she would say that she's concerned, right? I think she would worry about what does it mean to her?
Okay, that makes sense. What does this mean to me and my team, presumably?
Yeah, and her team.
And you would want her to say something positive certainly to her team.
Yeah, I think it's similar to Hector, right? So I think if she takes it, if we can set it up so that she's taking it on as the possibility for the positive. So we're going to be a better run organization in the future, then that would actually be beneficial. And to have that message in the entire maintenance department, that would be very valuable.
Okay. And is there anything in particular, so I think you definitely want her to ideally demonstrate her support with her own team.
Yeah. Talk about it in a supportive manner. They meet every day to talk about what's going on with the aircraft. So making sure that there's a positive message that goes out with that is important as well.
Okay. All right, great. So there's a lot here to all of this. When you look at this in aggregate, you can start to see some of the things that you can do, right? Sounds to me like, I think, Megan, this is partially what you were saying. For Frida and for Cassandra, they need to understand the benefits of this, the benefits for the company. And then for Hector, he needs to see the possibility of a better relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that's like those are the things that would most help these folks be positive influencers on the Leadership Skyward team.
Okay, good. That sounds great.
So thank you for going through that exercise. Hopefully you can see that this gets to a level of detail where you can start to, at least as a leadership team, wrap your brain around it collectively of the kinds of things that you're looking to do yourselves as leaders. And then also it sets you up for what we're going to talk about next time, which are, what are the signs that it's going well? What are the signs for you that the change is progressing how you hoped it would? And we'll talk a lot more about that the next time we meet, when we talk about metrics. So let me stop sharing. Okay, if you go to the next slide. All right, so I'm gonna, like we did last time, I'm gonna put what we actually put here. We'll put it on the private site, so you'll have this to look at later if you'd like to, and download it. Going back to our original process, once you have done this analysis, you can start to identify the actions that you can take collectively, especially again as a leadership team, to help them become more partners with you to lead this change. And then we always recommend that as a leadership team that you look at this, revisit it periodically, because things will change, right? Your influencers will change. They perhaps will, ideally become, really positive influencers for the change, but there could be a new development that suddenly throws a monkey wrench into the whole thing. So you need to pay attention to that in order to make sure that they're helping you make progress. And then one last point that I always want to make sure that we remind everyone of is that this is obviously from your perspective, right? You don't know for sure. Just like we talked about in the change story, this is really empathy in action, right? What you're trying to do is put yourselves in the shoes of the other person to get a sense of what their perspective might be. You're not going to be right all the time. That's kind of not really the point. The point is to try to understand their perspective better so that when you start to interact with them, you are doing a better job of listening and noticing what actually is important to them and making that adjustment. So that's the last point we have on influencers for this session.
All right. So next week, next time, 2 weeks, we'll get to the change metrics. And so now that we know what's going on and we understand what's happening with the people, we can start putting metrics in place to actually monitor how we're progressing through the change and know, are we being successful or not being successful?
And just to let you know, we've been putting things on the private site. We will there's a few things on there right now for this class, but we will add the presentation like we did last time. We'll also add the chat, which I think is useful if you want to see what other people said later. And then we're also going to put the influencer stakeholder analysis tool, which is in essence what we went through together, so that you'll have that as a tool as well.
All right, great. So just a reminder, we are working through some Joy research. So if you got a CEO that or a leader that would be interested in talking with us, or you are one and would be interested in talking with us, trying to collect interviews for all of that. And that's it for today's session. So I'm going to take a page out of the U of R manual, which says when you get to the end of a class, you should ask the participants, the students in the class, to take the survey. So there's a link to the survey. And so if you guys could click on that, and then we got a few minutes left. If there are any questions, you guys want to hop in and ask us anything about what we've covered so far or where we're going, we would love to talk to you about any of those. So what do you got? The link's not clickable. What?
What?
All right, hang on. I will get it to you in a moment. So while we're doing that, what questions do you guys have for us?
So Nate, you asked the question, how often do people jump to metric first before influencers? Well, metrics are one of those things that everybody wants to have. They're really desirable. In the change world, they're kind of the holy grail, right? How do you measure change? It is actually possible and useful to do that within reason, because we know it costs money, it costs time to do any kind of measurement. So that's what we'll cover next time. But yeah, people will try to get to measurement immediately, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how far do they go, and is it actually worth measuring, right? So there's useful, and then there's interesting. So what's actually useful, right? So that's what we're going to cover next time. But yeah, people do like to jump to metrics because it's, everybody likes numbers.
Did Leadership Skyward apply for and/or receive a PPP loan?
That's a really good question. We didn't ask that.
That's a great question. It'll really probably come up more later. Yes, Leadership Skyward did apply for the PPP because we're not dumb. It's free money, so we're going to go grab it. But fortunately, we have a robust pipeline of clients eager to interact with us, so we don't foresee a particular economic problem right now. Thanks for the question.
Great CFO.
We have a great CFO.
Let's see, any other question? Oh, that's a good one. Somebody.
I'll let you answer Austin's first, and then I'll go.
Oh, okay. What happens if folks on the executive? Oh, this is classic. Of course, this is always, it's typically, this is normal. Well, the whole idea is to get people rallied around the change, right? So it's not really about the executives at that point. It's about what they're doing together to lead this change. That's why it's so interesting to do the stakeholder analysis. So that's really what Ed and I did back when we were working on this project together. We looked at all the leaders and we did the stakeholder analysis with the leaders, and we got an understanding through that exercise, like why people were reacting the way they were. It often had to do with what was unique about their role, and then how that was a problem related to the change itself. So yeah, there's always going to be disagreement and even poor relationships, especially at the executive level where there's so much competition and there's just so much more at stake at that level. So the idea is to make sure that you understand what their stake is in the change, and then appeal to that and see if you can find common ground. The common ground usually should be some sort of risk if they don't achieve the change. So Amber, did you have something?
Yeah, I've got a two-part question.
Okay.
So real life example, where we're dealing with multiple levels of change at our company, process, people, technology, all those fun things.
Yeah.
But I'm finding that we get stagnant because instead of putting a stake in the ground and actually claiming the intention of the change, there's a lot of investigating how the change could potentially affect the company, which leads to a lot of circular conversation. So how do you, first question is, how do you convince people to first set an intention and then go through the investigation exercise? And then the second question, which is, further complicating the situation, is how do you influence an influencer when they're a decision maker on a change that would diminish their own power?
Ooh, that's a tough one. All right, well, so the first one is about making traction, basically. That one is, well, I mean, it definitely does depend on the culture, but the strategy that I like to use there is for the group to take one step forward. Some people would call that a pilot. Some people call that low-hanging fruit, something. But if you make one step forward that is kind of in that no regret move category, then you can learn from it while you're exploring these other things. And usually what I'll do is both of those things. I'll try to have some sort of win to address an immediate need while I'm investigating these things that take longer. So I'm going down two tracks. It can be applied the same way, where you agree to try something that is worth trying and learning from that while you're kind of exploring these other ideas. Maybe as part of that, you are getting to some amount of decision making, some amount of agreement progress, so that once everybody can connect to that positive thing, that change that you have achieved, it starts a momentum going. So that could be a way of doing it. That's the way I often approach those things. And on those, the situation where the influencer is going to lose power, that is a really hard thing. So I think that's going to take, that's like a deeper analysis, because they may have to leave the role. I mean, there could be, there's some things there, and I don't know the specifics of it, but why would they leave the role? What would what would be their motivator to do that? I mean, I can imagine there wouldn't be a motivator to do that. So it really, I think what you need to do, start off with, is answering questions like this, just to try and get a sense of who they are and what they value, and see if there's power that they could have other ways. It really just it depends on the specifics of the power too. Like you're talking about, could be a number of employees, could be decision-making power, so many different kinds of power. But, if you want to talk about that, we can talk about that when we meet next time, because we'll be on early. Maybe we can explore the details of that. Might be interesting for this group.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put time on my calendar to jump on a little early.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks,
it'd be
Amber.
great.
All right, so I know we're getting to the end here. Debbie, you got anything you want to say to the group before we wind up? I know people are probably going to jump to other calls and all the other crazy things they have to do.
Everybody's going to jump on the next Zoom call, but thank you so much. This was excellent. I think this whole series and how you're building from one to the next is just incredible. So thank you so much, and thanks everybody for
Hey,
participating.
Debbie, before everybody goes, it's rare that we ever have this many people together these days. So, spoiler alert, I just want to let all of you know that tomorrow morning in the faculty and staff meeting, Ed Cook will be recognized as the outstanding MBA instructor for this year among all the faculty. So,
Wow, I didn't know that. Thanks, Randy.
congratulations, Ed. That's why I said it's a spoiler alert, right?
Wow. That's awesome.
And I have this fancy egg for you that I will get to you at some point.
Okay.
Appropriately cleansed and sanitized.
Great.
Wow, that's
Wow.
awesome.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks, everyone. It's great
Congratulations, Ed.
it's great
Very
to
well.
see you guys and great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
All right.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.